The ability to capture a moment in time, I think, which a photograph can do, is an amazing and a powerful form of communicating. And generally speaking, I feel like storytelling in and of itself resonates for people. And visual storytelling is an incredibly way to communicate in all languages across communications. There are images that I can still remember from the moment that I first traveled to Africa that photographers showed me, that I still think to myself, there was no way I could capture that even as a storyteller who was using video or words the way that still photo did. Well, for a long time, since I was in college, I knew that I wanted to impact social change. And I wanted to try to figure out a way to do that. And fairly quickly, the idea of storytelling became something that I gravitated towards. And storytelling through various media was where I focused my energies. So even in college, and then even in graduate school, when I went back to graduate school in international affairs, my master's thesis was on the impact of the media on political and social change internationally. I focused on South Africa at that time. Mandela was still in prison. And since that time I got into journalism and went through journalism and then started to work with nonprofits and foundations on storytelling. I truly believed that storytelling could actually change the world for the better, and that's why I do what I do. One of the things that in the new media landscape that a lot of us have been talking about and thinking about is the fact that everyone can be a storyteller and a media distributor in their own way. So anybody can start a blog, have a Twitter feed, get on Facebook, take video on their cell phones, edit that video and send it to other people. What we noticed fairly quickly, and what I noticed in my work, was the craft of storytelling is hard, and it takes a real talent. And when you meet certain people who are great storytellers, you know it. There are certain people when you're sitting around the table for dinner who can start to tell you a story and you're riveted from beginning to end. It's that same way, whether it's in journalism or film or otherwise. And I think that over the past number of years when I've been trying to work with other nonprofits and foundations and in other parts of the world, what we noticed fairly quickly, and what I've noticed is that people who have the skill of storytelling have a very special expertise, and they have the ability to actually convey complicated subjects in really compelling ways. And that's an art form that I feel one has to kind of cultivate and respect and take advantage of. So measurement is a huge challenge. Everyone wants to actually measure their results. As many people say, you become what you measure. And in the current media landscape, a lot of people throw out numbers pretty fast. I got this many uniques, this many people viewed this YouTube video, I've got this many Twitter followers. And I think that there's a danger in the numbers game to assume that numbers in and of themselves mean impact or mean change. They don't. I think that they're important and they can inform us, but figuring out what the right ways to measure impact is a hard thing to do. And when you are able to change the perceptions of certain people in certain times and even change their behaviors, that's what real impact is about. It isn't necessarily about how Charlie Bit My Finger on YouTube has 150 million views. It doesn't translate directly. And so as we really think about how we want to change the world and use storytelling to change the world, I think that we need to step back a second and think to ourselves as we measure, are we measuring the right things? Because people give us certain numbers, we should be asking the question, so what? Kind of a hard one to answer sometimes. And so I think we'll get to know better. Even YouTube has been thinking about the fact that some of their algorithms aren't necessarily giving the best results. They've started to think about how they change them, so it's time on site and time watching something rather than necessarily this got this 20 million views. And so we need to keep getting better at that and not get too sucked into just assuming that all the numbers tell us what success is. All of us in the position that actually fund projects also need to ask the hard questions about what those numbers tell us. We as funders try to think in terms of outcomes. What would be the outcome that we're hoping for by telling these stories, by engaging with a content creator? And as we think about those, you can get to the outcomes without necessarily getting too sucked into the numbers game. People used to come to me all the time and said, you know, if you're in Parade magazine, there's 60 million readers of Parade magazine. Yeah, I'm not so convinced there are 60 million readers, and I know people who've written for Parade magazine and they had very little response. So I do think as we as funders think to ourselves, let's think about what the outcomes are that we're hoping for and really see if we can track those rather than just the numbers that someone gives us. Working, you know, one of the goals in social change is obviously community and community building and getting people involved. And what we realize is a lot of these problems are better solved from the ground up than necessarily from the top down. Some of the best solutions come from places that you wouldn't expect. Innovation comes from places that you wouldn't expect. And I think one of the things that we've realized is that we need to be open to collaborating with people that we wouldn't necessarily know of or know about. One of the things that we're trying to do more of is issue, you know, open challenge grants and try to encourage people from all parts of the world to say, I think I've got an idea of how we can help resolve this problem or provide a solution. Because one of the things that funders can do better is when they see a solution somewhere, obviously, they can try to help leverage that so it reaches more people in more places around the world. So we need to be open to finding those solutions in new places, and that's part of what the collaboration is about, is understanding that the community can often come up with better solutions than someone sitting a long way away. So one idea that I think is absolutely essential is authenticity. And when people are working in the field, authenticity, credibility, integrity are essential. Anytime a storyteller actually shades the truth, it hurts all of us as storytellers. And so I think it's important to be honest in our storytelling. You know, when I worked at Nightline, Ted Koppel used to often say, didn't like the word objectivity, and I agreed. There wasn't objectivity in the storytelling, but there should be fairness, there should be honesty, it should have integrity, and that's absolutely essential. So while we like to go out and tell stories and we want to impact change in the world, and sometimes we go and tell those stories and we wish that they worked out better than they are because these problems, some of these problems are really hard, we have to remind ourselves we have to, at the end of the day, continue to be honest.